Well, I got a really big story for you. You know, I heard a lot of stuff in the alternative media about the Russians dumping the U.S. dollar, and I says, "Oh wow, gee, you know what the hell's that mean?" You know, that in itself is not a story, but I'm going to give you what is a really big story, and is actually a real threat to the U.S. dollar for a few reasons. But first, I want to tell you about the stuff you're seeing in the alternative media sometimes about talking about, this is a picture of Russia. These are their oil reserves and pipelines, mainly in northern Siberia, also on the border of Kazakhstan and stuff, and Yuks, northern Yuks, whatever that is. How do you say that? But that's where their oil reserves are. But they could just pipe them down into China. But, I just want to comment first on the alternative media stuff about, Russia dumping the dollar and being a big threat to the hegemony of the world reserve currency. They don't have that many dollars to dump, and if they are dumping dollars, it's because they're broke and they need the freaking money. They got to sell the dollars to keep afloat, right? They've been losing a lot of money on the oil sales. Now, here's the freaking beauty of what they did, man. This was a slick move. Russia's got a lot of oil production. Now, previously, China has been getting most of their oil from the Saudis. And you know what goes on with the Saudis, right? When they get the proceeds, all oil transactions are conducted in dollars. You pay, when you buy oil from the Saudis, you pay for it in dollars, and then the Saudis in turn go ahead and they reinvest the proceeds from of this oil, the net profit, and they invest that in U.S. dollars. That's what keeps the dollar afloat. That's the big petrodollar, right? Scheme, whatever you want to call it. Well, everybody can play this scheme. So what China did was they cut Russia a really good deal on the oil. Russia cut China a very good deal on the oil. But in turn, China is going to pay Russia in Chinese yuan. So there's no dollars being exchanged. So there's that many less dollars on the actual oil market. That's a major threat to the hegemony of the petrodollar. China is paying Russia for its oil in their money, in Chinese money, Chinese yuan. So Russia basically, now what went on is Russia had a huge increase in the amount of oil they're selling to China over the last month or so, and the sales of Saudi oil slumped radically. Now, you also got to figure this. China has surpassed the United States in oil consumption. Now, where is oil actually being sold on a global market from Saudi? It's not actually going into the United States, where most of our oil is domestically produced, and of the oil that we get imported, the imports are mainly coming from Canada and also Mexico. There's not really that much coming from Saudi. Saudi's actually heavily dependent upon China and Japan. China is like their number one customer. So Russia undercut them a sweetheart deal on the oil. And you also got to figure it's probably a hell of a lot easier to transport the oil to China from Russia because of pipelines. Saudi, you have to go by ship, container ship. So, if you're going from oil from Saudi to China, right? Well, considering, China's got, they're the number one demand for oil right now, this is a big deal. The alternative media is actually missing the entire point when they talk about, that Russia's dumping the dollar, and it doesn't mean nothing. They don't have that many dollar reserves, It's like if somebody else was, if China and Japan were dumping the dollar, we'd be in trouble. But no, actually the way that the dollars are being dumped is the fact that China is not using dollars to pay for its oil since it's getting it from Russia. So now actually Saudi they used to be the number one supplier to China. Now they're number 3 Not only is Russia the number one supplier to China for oil, Angola is number two, and Saudi is number three. So, and China's just looking for a better deal on its oil. That's all they're doing. So this is a major, 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 major threat to the U.S. dollar. It's not BS. It's not a conspiracy rumor or nothing like that. Because when I start thinking about, I don't really have all the statistics right in front of me, but I know that, where is Saudi really selling to? Mainly China. Right? I mean, they're still selling to China, but the sales to China have dropped off a cliff. I mean, it's not like they stopped 100%, but, they dropped off the cliff. And also, Saudi was trying to get Russia to cut its production, and they're not doing it. Russia's not doing it. That's a real threat to the dollar there, big time, man. So, I don't know where the dollars are going to go. You see, that's the thing that gets me, is because most of the dollars are being held overseas in large accounts, because all countries and large corporations have to have dollars, supposedly, at least in the past, to buy oil on the market. Well, that's a major, major hit now, whereby Russia is selling oil directly to China. This just happened just in the last few months, and China is paying for it in their Chinese yuan. And Russia's going along with it, saying, well, we don't need a dollar, we'll take Chinese yuan. Well, that's a big problem, because what it means is all those dollars overseas, if they ever come back here domestically, we really would have rampant inflation. I don't know how fast it's going to happen or what, but there's a lot of things coalescing at the same time, with the the U.S. debt at over $18 trillion and the trade deficit, and now this is actually worse than what Saddam Hussein did or what Gaddafi tried to do. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know when if it means the sky's going to fall right away. I don't know. I thought it was an interesting point, though. So, but the one damn thing is, back in the old days, this used to be the $20 bill, right? Guess what George Washington on instead of Alexander Hamilton? That's probably what was on there. I think this is the old one, in gold coin. In gold coin. Payable to the bearer on demand. Right? I think we're in deep doo-doo, man, because once you got away from these principles, it's like one step at a time, and then all of a sudden the whole damn thing falls apart. It's like one thing leads to another, man. So I don't know, like I don't know what the hell that means as far as how long this is going to last, or if the dollar's going to crash next year, I don't know. But remember, China is now in the number one spot for oil demand. Now, Saudi has not stopped all their sales to China in oil, but they dropped off the side of a cliff. I mean, they dropped radically. I think it was like over 40%. A lot. They were the number one exporters of oil to China. But Russia is number one, Angola is number two, and now Saudi's number three. And Russia is receiving Chinese yuan in payment for its oil. So all that oil that was now all that oil that's now being sold from Russia is not being sold from Saudi, and Saudi's not getting those dollars. So there's a hell of a lot less demand for dollars that way, and there's a hell of a lot less profitability on the Saudi P&Ls, and so I don't know. I don't know how long it's going to take, though. I mean, these things don't freaking happen overnight, but that's a biggie, man. And I know people have been hearing the sky's been falling for the last umpteen years, but man, I found this to be very interesting, and I figured I'd put it out there because I guess it's the real danger zone versus the point that some people were trying to say that the Russians were dumping dollars. I personally think the Russians were dumping dollars because they needed to dump dollars because they were broke and they were freaking running deficit spending, and they were, you know, they were in the red. You know what I mean? They had to dip into their reserves. They weren't dumping dollars. They were in the red. They were in a hole. The government's in a hole. You know, they're having financial problems. But this is really, I don't know, it's a delicate balance too, man. But, you know, the other side of it too is, you know, we look at this money and we say, yeah, in gold coin, yeah, that's the way we want it. And we can say, yeah, the dollar today is just a petrodollar. It's all fiat. But then again, what's the Chinese money? It's fiat. I mean, yeah, you hear all this talk in the alternative media that they're freaking buying more gold, but, you know, they don't have anywhere near as much gold as in the United States, for one. I mean, yeah, I know that's not really maybe connected to the government per se, but somebody's got it. I can tell you that right now. But it's a complicated situation because, you know, they always use that expression, the powers that be. There's so many different opinions in push and shove and push and pull and divergent goals in the powers that be that you really don't know what the hell is going on exactly, because there isn't really like a strict game plan out there, man. It's just greed, power, and money, and, you know, and egos. So, you know, it's really hard to see how this is going to work out. But it's just an interesting point, very interesting point. China, which is the number one oil user, you know, they have the biggest demand for oil in the world, and on top of it, they don't produce their oil. They get almost all their oil imported. Their number one importer, they're getting most of their oil from Russia, and Russia's receiving payments in Chinese money in return. I don't know. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of the dollar, too, because somehow or another, you know, we looked at the euro being super strong back in 2008, and then what happened? It went from 150 to oblivion practically. Now they got the Greek crisis again. And, you know, we heard about in the 70s and 80s how strong Japan was coming on, and then they went into like the, I don't know, 2 decades of stagnation. There's so many different things, you know. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of the West, but I don't know. I don't really know what to make of this, but it is an interesting point. So I don't know. Take it for what it's worth. You know, it may not. It could be a real problem. It could be, but I don't know. I don't know. And nobody does, to tell you the truth. It's just, you know, and I don't want to beat the flames of, you know, the sky is falling, but it doesn't look good, man. I can tell you that right now. It sure don't look good.